3 minutes.
Taoiseach, it is not possible to put into words the sheer horror of the inferno that engulfed the lives of maybe as many as 80 innocent people in the Grenfell Tower in London. It's emerging now that not only were people burnt alive in that inferno, but many of them were poisoned by cyanide released from the combustible material that was used to clad that building. But what is now becoming increasingly apparent is this is not simply a huge humanitarian and personal tragedy, but it is an absolute scandal and outrage. It is not an exaggeration to say that what happened in Grenfell was murder by negligence, murder by austerity, murder by cutbacks, murder by inequality, and murder resulting from utter contempt for the well-being of the less well-off in British society. The Grenfell Action Group warned several times in the 2 years preceding, the Residents' Association, that the tower was an accident waiting to happen. They said in November of last year, in prophetic words, it is a truly terrifying thought, but the Grenfell Action Group firmly believe that only a catastrophic event will expose the ineptitude and incompetence of our landlord. The Housing Association managed by Kensington and Chelsea Borough Council. Now, the question Taoiseach for us, as well as extending our solidarity to people, is could Grenfell happen here? And are we prepared to ensure that it doesn't? And we have had warnings from Kevin Hollingsworth, quantity surveyor, expert in this area. We've had warnings from the Dublin Fire Brigade. We've had warnings from fire experts, all saying categorically Grenfell could happen here. Kevin Hollingsworth said 40% of the buildings that were built, of the multi-occupancy units built during the period of the Celtic Tiger, are fire hazards. Noel Manning, the fire expert, says that the building regulations, which were updated this year, have completely ignored the warnings of fire consultants that the regulations themselves are defective and actually can produce the sort of chimney effect that we saw in Grenfell because they don't have proper fire resistance between units in multi-occupancy buildings. We have the scandal of self-certification when buildings are being designed and constructed, and we have no inspection whatsoever of buildings that may be unsafe. What is the government going to do about this to ensure we don't have a repeat of the utter tragedy and outrage of Grenfell?
Taoiseach, 3 minutes.
Words can I really adequately deal with the horror that unfolded in London with this horrific and tragic fire, with the loss of so many lives. And undoubtedly it raises questions in the UK in relation to the kind of issues that you've mentioned, but for every country will want to examine if fire safety measures are good enough, if there are materials being used here in cladding, such as were used in the UK, and to review fire safety. And the Minister has already started to do all of that. Of course, a tragedy like that would raise questions and does mean that we have to review everything. And that, I want to assure the House, that is being done, and was done. That process started immediately. It was started by Minister Owen Murphy. A couple of points I'd want to make in relation to fire fatalities in this country. While each fire death is one too many, the annual fire death rate per million people in Ireland has been almost halved over the past 15 years. I think it's important to note that, because we don't want people getting unduly anxious about this country in relation to this issue. But as I say, of course, questions arise. It's been almost halved over the past 15 years, from 11.9 fire fatalities per million population on average for the years 2001 to 2003 to 6.9 on average for 2014 to 2060. So our country is amongst those with the lowest incidence of loss of life in fire. So that's an important context for us to consider this. I mean, having said that, we do need to examine recent bills, take up the points that you're making, be absolutely sure that our building regulations are absolutely up to the task, that we have the personnel and force to supervise, that the local authorities have the staff that they need to continuously monitor the situation. And there is, for an example, at present, a report into that fire in Newbridge, and the Minister no doubt will discuss it on the floor of the Dáil when that report is available. But following the introduction of the Building Control Amendment Regulations 214, there is now a requirement on the owner of a building to assign a competent professional to act as an assigned certifier in relation to individual projects and to lodge a statutory certificate of compliance on completion with the local building control authority. So we have been taking increased action to ensure that the building regulations, for example, again, are adequate to deal with the tasks that you outline. But again, Part B of the building regulation sets the minimum standards for fire safety in the new buildings and in buildings that are undergoing a material change. I think that's important as well. That is now captured in our building regulation. So clearly one can never be vigilant enough, but as I say, the Minister has started a review, is examining the overall situation, and I have no doubt if there are extra precautions and further initiatives needed that they will be taken.
Deputy White Barrett, 1 minute.
First of all, can I just say maybe to all of the House that I know we had a break and so on and the nomination of the Taoiseach, but even at this late stage I think it might be useful before the order of business to have a minute's silence if there was agreement for the Grenfell residents, because I think a strong statement does need to go from all of us in this House about our solidarity on this matter. I welcome the fact that building standards have improved and that fire fatalities are low. But I have to tell you, Taoiseach, that I'm not satisfied with the government response to date on this matter. The new regulations around building, I have been told, despite the government seeking submissions and meeting with some of these fire experts, have ignored requests to update the fire regulations to ensure that fire resistance and structural integrity between units is at the level it should be. And indeed, the Newbridge fire proves this. Those buildings were signed off and certified as safe. And yet the fire spread in 28 minutes through 8 units. It should have taken 420 minutes. And what we are being told by fire experts is that huge percentage of the buildings in this country are not safe because the regulations themselves are defective, and our local authorities have been gutted of their ability to inspect these things. And very lastly, the self-certification process is not acceptable. It's not acceptable.
Well, as I said, this whole area is being reviewed by the Minister. He took action immediately. He requested all local authorities to review their multi-storey social housing units to ensure that all early warning systems, including alarm and detection systems, emergency lighting and means of escape, because that was a big issue in that fire, including corridors, stairways and emergency exits, are fully functional and in place. And safety, I agree with you, Deputy, safety has to be our first concern. There was also a meeting of the Management Board of the National Directorate for Fire and Emergency Management. He convened that on Tuesday the 20th of June to assess the readiness of fire authorities to respond to emergencies. In terms of raising awareness across landlords, including landlords of households in receipt of social housing supports and rental assistance, the Minister asked the Residential Tenancy Board to immediately notify all landlords again of their responsibilities and obligations as landlords in terms of ensuring that the properties fully comply. And a business control management system alert. An alert was issued to all registered users of the BCMS to remind those involved in works to existing or new buildings of the need to remain vigilant in relation to the very compliance that you're talking about. But can I say to you, Deputy, that I think you raise very relevant issues. As I say, not just in the UK and Ireland, and I'm sure internationally, what happened in Grenfell will prompt a re-evaluation of the approach to fire safety, particularly in high-rise buildings, and Ireland should be no different and will be no different. And if what you say is true, if there are particular people concerned in relation to specific issues, I would hope they would bring them to the attention of the Minister immediately so that they can form part of the review and the response so that the extra measures are taken if necessary.
We've spent 2 minutes now.